My son works with you sometime. He's with Brandon. Good evening and welcome to a special meeting for the town board for the town of Tustin. Meeting's called to order and join me in the pledge to the flag, please.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 2 under special business will be the seeker forum, part 2.
So, yeah, everybody's got it in front of Ben. Just to refresh everybody's recollection, about a year ago or so, you folks had made the lead agency determination and had adopted a part 1 of the seeker, which was basically the background information and description of what the project is and relevant information to it. And now in order to complete seeker, you have to complete a part 2. This is a full environmental assessment form. You have to complete part 2, and that's been prepared by Delaware Engineering, Joe's firm, with recommended responses. And following that, if you are willing to accept the responses as recommended by the engineer, I think the right thing to do would be to adopt the resolution, adopting that part 2 as the town board's own. And then you can then move on to part 3. I don't know, Joe, do you want to run them through the? Yeah, if you want, or I can if you want. Whichever your preference is. It's your part 2, so I just assume you guys deal with the substance.
Question number 1, impact on land. Proposed impact may involve construction on or physical alteration of land surface of the site. That is correct. The proposed action would involve construction on and physical alteration of the lands. So from that point on, none of these sub-questions are believed to have a moderate or large impact. The project action may involve construction on land where depth of water is less than 3 feet. Depth to water table is less than 3 feet. We did some analysis and we have found that the amount of land on which the water table is believed to be less than 3 feet is minimal. We also believe that none of the new structures would be constructed on those parts of the water district. The proposed action may involve construction on a slope of 15% or greater. While there are parts of the water district that have a slope of that, 15% or greater, there are no proposed structures going on that, those parts of the district. And due to the type of construction that might occur, just being water main replacement, based on the seeker guidelines, this would not constitute a moderate to large impact. Proposed action may involve construction on land where bedrock is exposed, generally within 5 feet of existing ground surface. We do not believe that this is the case anywhere where proposed actions will take place. Proposed action may involve the excavation and removal of more than 1,000 tons of natural material. This should not occur due to the proposed improvements. The proposed action may involve construction that continues for more than 1 year or in multiple phases. This may be the case, but based on seeker guidelines, you would only select large to moderate impact for this one if it was continuous. If it is intermittent construction, say, during the spring of each year for several years, phased different parts of the district, then you are directed to say no or small impact for that question. The proposed action may result in an increased erosion, whether from physical disturbance or vegetation removal. We do not believe this would occur. No major vegetation removal should exist, and any erosion that would occur would be very minor during construction and should be limited by standard construction practices. The proposed action is or may be located within a coastal erosion hazard zone. This is not the case. Impact on geological features. The proposed action may result in the modification or destruction of or inhibit access to any unique or unusual landforms on the site. cliffs, dunes, minerals, fossils, caves. Based on the DEC's environmental resources mapper, we do not believe that there are any such features within the water district, so that is a no.
Joe, let me just interrupt you for a second.
Absolutely.
As you see by going through the first question, the second question, you got the first broad question, the yes or no question. And where the answer is yes, as was with one, then you go through sub parts to see whether you would have either no or small impact or moderate to large impact. And in this instance, the question, the general question is answered no, so you don't have to do the sub parts. You move on to the next question.
Does that apply to everyone?
Throughout the entire form. Yep.
All right, number 3, impacts on surface water. The proposed action may affect one or more wetlands or other surface water bodies, streams, rivers, ponds, or lakes. The water district is on the Delaware River, and there are several small lakes within the water district. So the possibility is there. So I said yes for this one. The proposed action may create a new water body. It will not do that. The proposed action may result in an increase or decrease of over 10% or more than a 10-acre increase or decrease to surface area of any body of water. We do not propose actions that would have any increase or decrease to any body of water, so that is a no. The proposed action may involve dredging more than 100 cubic yards of material from any wetland or water body. There is no dredging proposed as a part of this project. The proposed action may involve construction within or adjoining a freshwater or tidal wetland or in the bed or banks of any other water body. All of the proposed improvements are outside the banks of the river, and we do not believe that they will be within any state or national wetland. The proposed action may create turbidity in a water body, either from upland erosion, runoff, or disturbing bottom sediments. We do not believe that any of the proposed improvements should result in increased turbidity to any body of water. Proposed action may include construction of one or more intake or withdrawal from surface water. The water system uses groundwater as its source. No water would be taken or released to surface water as the proposed improvements are designed. The proposed action may include construction of one or more outfalls for discharge of wastewater to surface water. There is no proposed discharge of wastewater associated with this project. The proposed action may cause soil erosion or otherwise create a source of stormwater discharge that may lead to a situation or to siltation or other degradation of receiving water bodies. We do not believe that any erosion caused during construction would have a major impact. And all through standard erosion and sediment control practices, we believe that this would be limited. Based on seeker guidelines, we feel that no or small impact is the correct answer to that question. The proposed action.
You're okay.
Okay. The proposed action may affect
The game show. Yeah.
the water quality of any water bodies within or downstream of the site of the proposed action. We do not believe that it will. The proposed action may involve the application of pesticides or herbicides in or around any water body. Nothing that we're doing in this project would involve pesticides or herbicides. The proposed action may require the construction of new or expansion of existing wastewater treatment facilities. We're dealing with water facilities. We do not believe the wastewater treatment facilities should be affected by this project. Impact on groundwater. The proposed action may result in new or additional use of groundwater or may have the potential to introduce contaminants to groundwater or an aquifer. Nothing that we're proposing would introduce contaminants into the groundwater, and we do not believe that this project would result in any change to the amount of groundwater that's being used by the water district. So that one we believe to be a no. Impact on flooding, the proposed action may result in development on lands subject to flooding. There are portions of the district that are within the 100 or 500-year floodplains. So this is a yes, but before I go through all these, because all of the structures that are proposed within the floodplain are either replacement of existing structures such as fire hydrants or replacement of below grade structures like water mains. We do not believe that any of the proposed improvements would have any impact to flood zones or the flow of water during a flood event. So the proposed action may result in development in any designated floodway. While it does, we do not believe that it would have any impact. And this is according to the seeker guidelines as well. So that would be a no. Proposed action may result in development within the 100-year floodplain and 500-year floodplain. This is true, but once again, below ground structures or replacement of fire hydrants, nothing that would alter the flow of water during a flood in any way. The proposed action may result in or require modification of existing drainage patterns. We do not believe that it would. The proposed action may change floodwater flows that contribute to flooding. We do not believe that it would. If there is a dam located on the site of the proposed action, is the dam in need of repair or upgrade? We do not believe that that is the case. Impacts on air. The proposed action may include a state regulated air emission source. We do not believe that this project would include any state regulated air emission source. Impact on plants and animals. The proposed action may result in the loss of flora or fauna. There is the potential for some common plants, grass, bushes to be removed during the installation of the new water storage tank or the new pump station. So this is a yes. The proposed action may cause reduction in population or loss of individuals of any threatened or endangered species as listed on New York State or the federal government that use the site or are found on, over, or near the site. We do not believe that any of the activities of this project would result in a loss of any endangered or threatened species. The proposed action may result in reduction or degradation of any habitat used by any rare, threatened, or endangered species as listed by New York State or federal government. We do not believe that the habitat would be altered in any way at the end of this project. The proposed action may cause reduction in population or loss of individuals of any species of special concern or conservation need as listed by New York State or the federal government that use the site or are found on, over, or near the site. We also believe that that would be a no or small impact. Proposed action may result in a reduction or degradation of any habitat used by any species or special concern and conservation need as listed by New York State or the federal government. We do not believe that to be the case. Proposed action may diminish the capacity of a registered national natural landmark to support the biological community it was established to protect. I do not believe that that is the case. Proposed action may result in the removal of or ground disturbance in any portion of a designated significant natural community. For this one, they asked for a source. We used the DEC's online environmental resources map. And it shows that there are no designated significant natural communities within the area of the proposed work. There are some within the area of Narrowsburg, but they are either upstream or downstream of Narrowsburg itself. The proposed action may substantially interfere with nesting, breeding, foraging, or overwinter habitat for the predominant species that occupy or use the project site. Nesting and breeding, foraging, all these things should not be affected by anything proposed by this project. The proposed action requires the conversion of more than 10 acres of forest, grassland, or any other regionally or locally important habitat. We would not be converting we would not be converting any land. Any forest land will remain forest land. Most of what we're doing is going to be within pre-existing roadways. And just to proposed action, commercial, industrial, blah, blah, blah. Projects only involves use of herbicides or pesticides. Once again, we're not using herbicides or pesticides. This is not a commercial or industrial project. And just to sum up on that one, there are some known registered species that live within the area of Narrowsburg, but these are predominantly associated with the river. So you have freshwater vertebrates and invertebrates that live in the river that are considered protected to some degree. But we do not believe that anything that this project is proposing would affect the river in any way. All improvements are well outside of the banks of the river. We don't think anything should impact those species. So those are all no's for that one. Impact on agricultural resources. The proposed action may impact agricultural resources. None of the properties within the district, to the best of my knowledge, are agricultural properties at this time. So that, I believe, is a no. Impact on aesthetic resources. The land use of the proposed actions are obviously different from or are in sharp contrast to current land use patterns between the proposed project and a scenic or aesthetic resource. We would only be constructing 2 structures that might have any impact on the aesthetic look. One is the water tank, which we would be replacing one water tank with a different water tank. So we believe the aesthetics of that would be consistent. The other would be a small building to house a pump station. We believe that this would be similar in construction to the existing well houses. So we don't think that this would have a substantial aesthetic change to any part of the water district. And then aside from that, fire hydrants and water mains wouldn't change the aesthetics of the district. So we believe that to be a no. Impact on historical or archaeological resources. The proposed action may occur in or adjacent to a historical or archaeological resource. This is a yes, because it is known that there are several properties within the water district that are on the historical register. And SHPO has designated this area as potentially including historic or archaeological resources. So for this one, we said yes. The proposed action may occur wholly or partially within or substantially contiguous to any buildings, archaeological site, or district which is listed on the National or State Register of Historic Places, or that has been determined by the Commissioner of the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation to be eligible for listing on the State Register of Historic Places. So there are several buildings within the district, but no proposed improvements would occur on those properties and nothing would be altered. No alterations will be made to any of those buildings. It would at most be water main being replaced in the street outside of those properties. The proposed action may occur wholly or partially within or substantially contiguous to an area designed or designated as sensitive for archaeological sites on the New York State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO Archaeological Site Inventory. Parts of the district are within such an area. We have conducted a what's called a 1A, 1B archaeological study. This was something that the State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historical Preservation requested we do before we moved forward. We completed that report, and the state accepted that report. There were no archaeological or historically significant artifacts found during that study. So SHPO has told us that they have no objection with us proceeding with this project. So that is a no. The proposed action may occur wholly or partially within or substantially contiguous to an archaeological site not included on the New York SHPO inventory. We do not believe that is the case, so that is a no. Other impacts. If the answer to any A, D, moderate to large impact occur, continue with the following questions to help support conclusion of part 3. The answers to all of those was no, but we went through this anyway. The proposed action may result in destruction or alteration of all or part of the site or property. It would not result in any alteration or destruction of any such site or property. The proposed action may result in the alteration of the property's setting or integrity. It would not do that either. Proposed action may result in the introduction of visual elements which are out of character with the site or property or may alter its setting. Once again, that would not be the case. Impact on open space and recreation. The proposed action may result in a loss of recreational opportunity or a reduction of an open space resource as designated in an adopted municipal open space plan. We do not believe that this would be the case. So for that one, it is a no. Impact on critical environmental areas. The proposed action may be located within or adjacent to a critical environmental area. We believe that the project is not located within or adjacent to any critical environmental areas.
There's no CEA anywhere in Sullivan County.
Yep.
So that would be specifically designated as such by the state of New York. and
That
There's
is
not
true.
one in Sullivan.
That is a no. The proposed action may result in a change to existing transportation systems. It would not. All roads would still go where they are going. Impact on energy. The proposed action may result in an increase in the use of amount of any form of energy. The answer to that is yes, because it is possible that some of the new equipment put in well houses or at the new water storage tank might result in the use of a slightly increased amount of electricity, and the new pump station would result in the use of more electricity than is currently being used by the water district. The proposed action will require a new or an upgrade to an existing substation. This is not the case. The proposed action will require the creation of or extension of an energy transmission or supply system to serve more than 50 single or two-family residences or to serve a commercial or industrial use. No new residences or commercial or industrial buildings would be constructed, so no, that is a no. The proposed action may utilize more than 2,500 megawatt hours per year of electricity. We do not believe it would use that much energy. The proposed action may involve heating and or cooling of more than 100,000 square feet of building area when completed. We do not anticipate heating or cooling any new square footage of building area. At most 50 by 50. That's very, very conservative. The proposed action may result in an increase in noise, odors, or outdoor lighting. There may be some lighting installed by the new water storage tank that would allow water operators to check on things if there were ever something that went wrong at night. This lighting would be motion censored or set up so that they would be able to turn it on and off when they needed it. So we do not expect that would have a significant impact. The proposed action may produce sound above noise levels established by local regulation. That nothing in the project should increase the noise levels long term. The proposed action may result in blasting within 1,500 feet of any residence, hospital, school, licensed daycare center, or nursing home. There should be no blasting associated with this project, so that is a no. Proposed action may result in routine odors for more than 1 hour per day. We do not believe there is any reason that that should occur. The proposed action may result in light shining onto adjoining properties. It would be, we would make sure that the lights that may be installed at the water storage tank would not shine onto adjoining properties. And that property is well, it has significant amount of tree cover. So we think it would be well separated from any of the adjacent residential properties. Proposed action may result in lighting, creating sky glow brighter than existing area conditions. This would not be the case. Any new lighting would be facing downward and would not create any sky glow. Impact on human health. The proposed action may have an impact on human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contamination. We do not believe there would be any new sources of contamination caused by this project in any way, so that is a no. Consistency with community plans. The proposed action is not consistent with adopted land use plans. We believe that the project is not out of consistency with any existing land use plans. Consistency with community character. The proposed project is inconsistent with the existing community character. We do not believe this is the case, as the community currently has essentially all of the structures that we are proposing. The replacement of or addition of similar structures to what already exists within the water district. I believe that is it.
That's the end of the part two.
Any questions, I guess?
You did a fine job.
Well, thank you.
So the purpose of the part two is for you to basically analyze whether or not there's the potential for any large to moderate impacts, which based upon the engineer's recommendations, there's nothing to indicate that that would be the case. My suggestion is that before you move on to the part three, which is the determination of significance, that if you're in agreement with what the engineer's recommendations and observations are here, that I think the board ought to adopt a resolution to accept the part two as prepared and recommended by the engineers as the town boards.
Does the board have any questions of the engineer? If not, I would entertain a motion to accept part two of the full environmental assessment form for the Marysburg Water System Improvement Projects as presented.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Fine.
So now's the point where you get to make the so-called determination of significance. Your options are that you can either find that there is the potential for a significant adverse environmental impact, which would result in a positive declaration and take the road down the road of doing an environmental impact study, or reaching a conclusion which would probably be the one that's supported, not probably, which is the one that would be supported by the answers that were given in the part two, which is that what's called a negative declaration, that there are no potential adverse environmental impacts that are likely to result in the project as it's presented. And Joe, you may want to elaborate a little more. He's got a part three prepared. They explain that this determination would be based upon the environmental assessment form and some other materials that were garnered both in the process of surveying other interested or involved agencies to see what their reaction was to the project when determining the lead agency and who would be the lead agency. And I think there was also a supplemental sheet that you guys had put together in conjunction with the part three, which pointed to some specific things in either the part two or the part one that supported the neg deck as well. Yeah, there you go. It bleeds over. It's one full page and bleeds over onto the next page. And I'll leave it to Joe. You can elaborate on this as you see fit before they act on it.
This is essentially explanations to why we said no to some of the specific questions before. And I believe I touched on most of this during my previous monologue there, but the proposed action may involve construction that continues for more than 1 year. I touched on that. Depending on the availability of funds, the project may need to be completed in multiple phases in order to decrease the upfront cost impact to water district customers. Additionally, due to the significant amount of water main which is proposed to be replaced, it may take more than one construction season to complete all replacement work. This is not anticipated to cause a significant environmental impact since the work will be spread throughout the district, not concentrated in any one location, and will be intermittent and will primarily occur within paved roadways. Then the next part is essentially what I said about 100-year and 500-year floodplains, and it's essentially the same answer for both. Although development may occur within the 100-year floodplain, nearly all proposed work within the floodplain involves replacing the water mains below grade, primarily under existing paved roadways. No new above ground structures are proposed within floodplains. As a part of this project, no alteration to water or drainage patterns will occur. And that is the same for the 500-year floodplain. Impacts on plants and animals, I also think I touched on this. Although it is possible that some common flora and or fauna, such as grass, trees, common bushes, may be slightly and temporarily impacted by this project, it is not likely that this project will have any significant or long-term impacts on flora or fauna, and there are no listed species that may be impacted by this project. Firstly, nearly all proposed work will occur within previously developed areas such as paved roads and previously graded, excavated, and developed properties. Secondly, most significant flora and fauna in the vicinity of the project live in or around the Delaware River, and the proposed work included in this project will not impact the Delaware River or occur within or near its banks. Impact on historical archaeological resources. Although the project will occur near several buildings which are listed on the National or State Register of Historical Places, these structures and the properties they occupy will not be impacted by the proposed work. This work would primarily involve replacement of water mains within the right-of-way of existing paved roads. And although the project will take place within an area designated as archaeologically sensitive, it is unlikely that any impact will occur. This is because nearly all work will occur within previously disturbed areas. Additionally, an archaeological survey, Part 1A, 1B, was conducted, and resulted in the issuance of a letter of no impact by the New York OPRHP.
So you've got a part 3 that's been prepared by and recommended by the engineering firm, Delaware Engineering, and by Joe on its behalf, which sets forth a proposed finding of a negative declaration that the project will not result in significant adverse impacts on the environment, and therefore an environmental impact statement would not be needed. It has what they like to refer to in secret parlance as a reasoned elaboration for that, which is what Joe just went through, what's spelled out on the face of the document. And again, it would be appropriate, it's the board's pleasure to do so, to adopt the resolution accepting this and authorizing Ben to sign it on behalf of the town board as lead agency. And it has to be signed and dated at the about halfway down the second page of the.
Board have any questions of the engineer regarding this?
No.
If not, I would make a motion to accept part 3 of the full environmental assessment form, the Narragansett Water System Improvement Project as presented with the determination, the negative declaration, no significant adverse impact, and authorize the supervisor to sign.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so at this point, unless Joe, you feel otherwise, I think the town board has fulfilled its obligations under the State Environmental Quality Review Act with regard to this project. And you're prepared to go forward with your next steps. And the first of those next steps is the holding of the public hearing, which is scheduled to commence just 5 minutes ago. So we're not doing too bad here on time.
Keeping it closed.
Should've run a little faster.
Can I close this meeting in order to open the public?
No, the meeting stays, the meeting stays open. Open the public hearing, it'll occur within the meeting, because when you close the public hearing, you're going to continue with the meeting to take the necessary following actions under both the town law and under the public finance law, the local finance law, I'm sorry, to deal with making findings that are required for the addition of facilities of the water district, and then for financing those facilities, if that's what your decision is.
At this point, I will open the public hearing. First of all, I'll take comments from the room first. And then
Ben, before you do that, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't, isn't she online? And I think she's going to make a little presentation for the benefit of not only the board, but the public at large, so that they can understand something about the project, so they can make any comments they make will be informed comments that the board can then consider. So you might want to do that before you actually take commentary, Ben.
that is a good point. Thank you. No sense taking comment. She's going to fill us in with the
Yep.
information. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I have a quick PowerPoint presentation. So if you will bear with me for 1 second.
So you can make that as big as possible.
Yep, it's maximized on my end.
Perfect.
So I think the host might need to make it better or bigger or share the view. Can everybody see that for now? Sorry.
I mean, it's they can't really see much of it.
It's
It's
a
hard.
big
You're all-
room and
you're
a
looking-
small screen.
This is looking at the screen. We did not have a projector prepared, unfortunately.
Excuse me?
We did not have a projector prepared, so they're looking at a laptop screen. And some of them
Oh.
are.
I gotcha, but hopefully folks that are on the Zoom call will be able to see it, but I'll go through, and then I can also provide a copy of the presentation for the public record as well.
We could get the slides show up on the, on the website, that's probably best.
Perfect. So again, we're here to have a public hearing on the Narrowsburg Water System Improvement Project. The public hearing is required by law in accordance with Town Law Section 202B, which basically says that whenever a town resolves to undertake a project to improve or reconstruct existing facilities on behalf of a water district, a public hearing must be held. So you can see from the map, hopefully, the orange is sort of the hamlet of Narrowsburg, and the blue is the boundary of the existing water district. The water district covers about 445 acres. There's 340 service connections, which serve roughly 500 people. And the water district was actually created quite a while ago, back in 1925. So the reasons for the project and why we're here today is that the water system, although it's had some, some minor improvements here and there over the years, really hasn't had a major overhaul in quite some time. So the first reason for the project, and probably one of the most important, is that the existing water storage tank has been in use for over 70 years. That's well beyond its useful life expectancy, and it needs major repairs or replacement. The other issues of concern are that water pressure is a concern within the system, particularly along Route 97, which is the outlying areas of the district. Although the well houses, the town has 3 wells, the well houses are in generally good shape, but they don't have backup generators to ensure that they will continue operating during a power outage. They don't have equipment to detect chlorine gas leaks, and they don't have sort of modern controls. In addition, many of the water mains are aging and need replacement. Some are as old as 95 years. Others are buried too deep or are undersized. Some are dead end lines, which impacts water pressure and water quality. A lot of the fire hydrants and water valves are aging and have limited or no operability. There are too few water valves in portions of the district. And because of the age of the system, water loss is a major concern. And the town would benefit from a concerted effort to locate and eliminate those leaks and sources of water loss, and that will help make operation more efficient. So a quick overview of the water system, just in sort of layman's terms, is, again, the town has 3 wells. The groundwater is drawn through the wells, and then it's pumped to a 200-gallon storage tank. Then it is distributed through the system through about 39,000 linear feet of pipe to the end user. Again, there's about 340 service connections serving about 500 residents. So the proposed improvements that are part of this project are first and foremost replacing the existing 200,000 gallon water tank with a new 250,000 gallon water tank with new sensors and controls. The well house improvements, I mentioned that before. The upgrades would include new emergency generators, chlorine gas detection, and flow measuring equipment. It would include water main replacement of some 2,400 linear feet of deep buried mains. Undersized distribution mains would be replaced. Some new mains would be installed to eliminate dead ends. And then remaining aging water mains would also be replaced. In addition, a new booster pump station would be installed on Route 97 to improve water pressure in that area. 55 of the existing fire hydrants would be replaced and 4 new hydrants would be added. 47 existing valves would be replaced and 27 new valves would be installed. And then finally, 4 new permanent auto flushing stations would be installed throughout the system. So as you can see, this is a pretty comprehensive upgrade that addresses sort of every aspect of the water system. Just really quickly, I wanted to give you an idea of some of the improvements. Joe can address any technical questions. Because the district is so large, I just wanted to zoom in on some key areas. Anywhere you see these yellow crosses, those are new water valves. Anywhere you see these sort of blue dashed lines, those are new water mains. Red are fire hydrants that would be replaced. So this zooms in on sort of the Main Street, Bridge Street, and the Flats area, just so that you can see the extent of some of the improvements. And then this is a close-up of some of the improvements along Route 97. Here's the location of the existing water tank and the proposed water tank. And then down the end of 97 is where the new booster pump station would be installed to improve water flow. So the $1 million question is, how much is this going to cost? That is really the purpose for requiring a public hearing through town law to make sure that the public understands what the potential impact might be on district ratepayers. So with all of the improvements that I just went through, the total project cost would not exceed $7.5 million. That is a maximum number. We're required by law to basically present the worst case scenario. We are assuming a potential interest rate of 2% through financing provided by the Environmental Facilities Corporation. That's subsidized financing. EFC does provide 0% hardship financing to some municipalities that meet certain requirements for low-income populations. The town did not meet that threshold in the last year. So we're assuming that the town will be able to receive some form of subsidized financing instead. And then finally, there is the potential to secure a grant of up to $3 million through a program called WIA, the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. That is grants that are available for up to 60% of the total project cost. It maxes out at $3 million. Those grants are not part of the CFA grant process that's currently been announced and due at the end of July. Typically, those grants are announced a little bit later in the summer and applications are due in the early fall. So our intent is to apply for those grants as soon as they're announced and available. So a quick overview of the current costs is right now, the system as a whole costs about $200,000 a year to operate and maintain. That cost is distributed through water rates to the users of the system. Currently, there is no capital debt on the system because there hasn't been major improvements in a long time. So if you take that $7.5 million at 2% interest over 30 years and assume a $3 million grant, the projected capital cost would be about $200,000 a year to repay that debt, capital, and interest. So what does that mean to the average user? You have to understand that water rates are actually split into 2 pieces. When you're paying for a water system, you're paying for operation and maintenance, which anyone that's connected to the system will pay for operation and maintenance through water rates. And then there's a capital portion. So that's the portion of any debt for capital improvements. And typically, every property in the district, even vacant land that is not hooked up to the water system, pays their fair share of the capital cost. So right now in Narrowsburg, the average user pays about $200 annually for water service. That's the average of all users. So that's residential, commercial. The law requires that we disclose the average residential user impact. So the average residential user, a typical single family home in Narrowsburg right now, based on the formula for how billing is done, pays approximately $142.40 annually for water service. Now, just as a point of comparison, that actually is quite a bit less than the average statewide, which is actually $887 a year is what the average residential user across New York State pays for water service. So that just gives you a sense of comparison. Projected water rates, average across the board, again, residential and commercial based on the formula for charging water rates, that will go up to $700.29 from $210.80. And the average residential user might see an increase from $142.40 to $631.89. That's essentially $157.97 per quarter, which is how the billing is done. And you can see the reason for that is the share of the capital costs. Operation and maintenance is expected to stay the same. So it's still that same $210.80 a year that the average person is paying for the operation and maintenance. But when you add the share of the capital improvements for a $7.5 million upgrade, that goes up to potentially, worst case scenario, up to $631 and change. And again, for comparison purposes, the New York State Comptroller's Office keeps data on water rates for every district in New York State. And the statewide average for 2021 for a typical residential property is $887 a year. So it's still below the state average, even with a worst case scenario of the $7.5 million project. So the take-home messages for today in terms of public comments and questions is that unfortunately, the water system needs to be upgraded sooner rather than later. Nobody likes to pay more, especially in these hard economic times. But this is a vital service that's provided to the residents in the district, and the upgrade really needs to happen sooner rather than later. The most critical issue is replacing the water tank. That needs to be addressed really first. The tank has been in use for over 70 years and really is in bad shape. As we said before, some sections of water main are believed to be 95 years old, making water main breaks and leaks increasingly likely. A concerted effort to locate and eliminate sources of water loss could actually help decrease annual operation costs, which could lower rates over the long term. The last point is that the new annual water rate that could potentially result from this project is still, even though it's a big jump from what people are currently paying, it's still below the recommended affordability range of 1.5% of the annual median income, which ends up being about $690 for Narrowsburg. So the next steps from here are after the public hearing and the comments from the public, the town will have the opportunity to actually adopt a bond resolution, which your council will advise you on in terms of the details. The state revolving loan fund financing application deadline is actually this Friday. I know this project has been delayed because of the archaeological resource issue and some other things. So normally we wouldn't cut it this close, but we are prepared to submit a financing application by Friday's deadline. As I said before, WIA grants have not yet been announced for 2021, but we expect that they will be available in a few months. And then with any luck, usually it's around a 6 to 9 month turnaround time to actually execute a finance agreement with EFC, at which point the town will have more detail on the actual financing terms, including the interest rate, and can make decisions about whether or not to do a portion of the project, to phase it, or to do the entire $7.5 million project. From there, once a financing agreement is executed, next year would be dedicated to doing the engineering design, permitting and bidding, with construction commencing in 2023 and concluding in 2024. So that's an overview of the project. And I don't know if Joe has anything else to add, but if you'd like to formally open the public hearing and get questions and comments from the public, that would be great.
Joe, did you have anything you wanted to add?
You did a good job, Helen. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Oh. From the room, we'll start. Mike Farrell.
As Helen indicated, and as the report indicated that's posted online, the water loss is apparently described as significant. So we know how much in terms of water produced versus what actually runs by the meters.
Not to be quoted, I don't believe Dave is in the, okay. We're producing approximately 8 million gallons of water.
12,700,000.
Okay, we are producing
minute.
12 million.
Well, yeah, 12.7 million, I was under the impression was what we needed.
Okay, and we were producing,
That I don't know.
I believe
I
between
asked-
14 and
never got a
16
question.
million gallons are producing,
How many?
between 14 and 16 million.
That's what I thought. I remember 14.
So we're producing several million gallons more. I believe it, the last I knew was approximately 2 million gallons that we were losing.
And that leakage, is that the assumption of leakage?
It's going into the system from the well,
Right.
and it's not coming into the meter, so it's being lost within the closed system.
So we have no idea exactly where all this water, where this 2 million gallons is sitting.
No, we've done, some of it has been repaired, but then recently we just did a repair underneath Route 97. Got the leak shut off. Another leak came out right behind it. We can't find it. And water travels, unfortunately. It's something I have learned. Water can travel quite a distance and pop up somewhere else, so.
I believe that was Ed Norton's advice too. Water will treat its own level.
Fix the leak, increases the pressure, and it finds another weak spot to get out.
Another possible source of loss is the way the water storage tank is designed right now. There is no level sensing equipment that would shut the system off if the water tank became too full. So right now, the water storage tank is filled manually. So essentially, the operators have to shut the wells off or turn them on based on the pressure in the system. Typically, you would have some sort of sensor equipment in the tank that would tell the system to shut itself off before water begins to overflow from the tank. So overflow from the water storage tank is a potential source of loss. We would like to add some sort of sensing equipment. Not only would that make the amount of time that the water operators need to spend going between sites and turning things off, it would increase the efficiency of the system and hopefully reduce water loss.
Leading into that comment, I'd like to talk a little bit further about the ordinance. the currently projects by energy customers and that project.
Not that I know.
Yeah, we just, the questions from the floor just need to be loud enough to be picked up on microphone for those people that are on Zoom. That's all. Even if you have to come forward, you're more than welcome to.
I'll be happy to repeat my question. Repeat the answer. My question was, leading up to the last comment on automation, whether in fact there was a similar system in operation for 500 customers or less that we could go and look at or point to.
And my response to that is, I do not have a specific example on my mind that I can point to at this time. I could look into that for you and possibly provide some examples.
I would also ask you, in your research, you mentioned, you mentioned during the presentation that in the event of electrical power outage, it could interrupt the water supply. In your research for the system, can you point to any incidents where this has taken place, where the town has been without order due to electrical outages?
I believe Dave can probably answer that question better for us. Dave?
Yeah, we have been without power after the tornado. We have a portable generator that is from World War II that we haul around trying to keep up water pressure.
Thank you. That's the superintendent of the.
So you were out of power, but not out of water, is that correct?
The town was out of power and the personnel for the water department utilized a mobile generator and used that to try to keep the pressure up enough so that they could be used throughout the town.
Example.
May I ask, on the automation topic, is that a system that involves internet at all or computer software?
There are different ways of doing it. We were proposing either a radio or telephone system. So signals will be transmitted either through telephone lines or by radio transmission. There would be computer involvement at each site. So there would be either a small human machine interface at each location. So each well house, the pump station, and the water tank. But there wouldn't necessarily need to be an internet connection from all of those.
So it's not subject to ransomware.
It would not be. It would essentially be a closed system where radio waves are going from up high at the water storage tank. Signal will be transmitted to the lower points where the various well houses are. It should not, to the best of my knowledge, be subject to that. I don't think it would be connected to. I believe it would be a closed system. It would not be subject to that.
What type of long-term vendor service contracts would be associated with this automated equipment?
Well, that would be something that would have to be determined during design. We would recommend a non-proprietary software system of some sort that would kind of eliminate your dependence on a specific company to provide that service, and you would be able to hire less specialized contractors to do upgrades, replacement work on that system. That would be our recommendation. That would be something that would be determined during the design.
Thank you. The reason I bring up the concern is simply because of the small customer base.
Understood.
You know, sometimes keeping it simple on a small operation like this, while you don't affect the greatest efficiency, as all of us drove here, petrol-powered cars, and not electric cars, you know, there's some practicality in trying to keep a system small, especially when it's borne by so many customers. So that was
that is a good point, and you're certainly not wrong about that. When I'm talking about automation in this case, it's not really a very big or expansive system. It would be a couple of small electronic boxes, one at each well house, and the well houses already have electronic equipment in them. It would really just be a matter of installing something that would allow them to communicate with each other. And with the tank. It really is not a very large portion of what we're estimating. The point is taken, but it would not be a significant amount of work or equipment required to get this communication done.
I have some more questions, but I'll let some other folks talk.
Any other questions from the floor?
Are there going to be any more additional fire hydrants? Different locations?
Yeah, I believe there were 4 or 5 that were proposed to be added to the. Four.
That's my question.
Yes, with regards to grants, you mentioned very specific grants, in the word was used, we will apply. Who actually is applying? Is the engineering firm applying for the grant?
They most likely will on our behalf, yes,
On behalf of the
yeah.
township.
The town would be the applicant. We have been working with the town and we'd be happy to continue working with the town to fill out applications if necessary to try and acquire funding.
I know that money was spent to hire an attorney for floating the bond. Has there been any consideration in spending money on a grant consultant in the field who may be able to seek out grants in other areas, possibly from private entities like the Giving Pledge being Gates and Buffett and folks, private entities that are trying to help small rural underserviced communities? Would there be a consideration of possibly getting a grant consultant or entertaining or discussing with a grant consultant if there was money to be found elsewhere?
Everybody's looking at me. Actually, I think that the engineering firm has the experience with the grant agencies for water. And that's been our experience, that they really are up on everything. I speak to Joe frequently on this issue as to has anything else opened up. And we are looking at one other avenue, which is the REAP board, which is the USDA money, but it won't be much, but we are exploring that as well.
I know that the town has worked with Candace Ballmer of RCAP Solutions. She is a good resource when it comes to knowing what's available and what is practical for grants in the area.
Yes, just so that you know, RCAP is what's the acronym for? Rural or? It's a federally funded program that for assistance for rural communities for infrastructure, primarily water and wastewater, I think. And I happened to meet her at a conference, the representative for our area, and she's been very, very helpful. And when I asked her as well about other funding, she said Delaware Engineering is very knowledgeable on that. So we feel comfortable.
Mr. Gollum, had you any experience outside of those 2 funds that were mentioned in the presentation in securing a grant?
I know that we most typically do pursue state and federal grant programs. As far as private grant programs, I personally do not have much experience pursuing those. I know that I did do a little bit of research on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and did not find anything that seemed that we might qualify for. I've done some research on a couple of them and have so far not found it. Unfortunately.
Also, our income level makes it so that we aren't able to get, a lot of communities get other grants because they're low income community, and we don't qualify for that.
And Jane, could I add to that? Can you still hear me?
Yes, please do.
No, I just want to say, just to echo what Joe said, typically, public infrastructure is a very sort of specialized area. And typically you're talking about state and federal grants that help municipalities with the cost of infrastructure. It's very rare in my experience that private foundations will invest in those kinds of projects because they're regarded as being more a general obligation of government. But on the bright side, I think everybody has probably heard some of the national debate about a federal infrastructure bill. And if something like that is passed, then we'd be in a position to apply for some additional federal money for infrastructure, depending upon what comes out, because they're going to be looking for projects that are essentially ready to go. So we're hopeful that there will be some additional grant money coming down from the federal government. WIA is a state grant program. So we will not leave any stone unturned.
I would then wrap up with my question saying, this may be a reach, but perhaps with the seed mill as a water customer, USDA, there might be something through the USDA for local food security or something like that, or Homeland Security money because of the seed mill. Just throw it out there. You got to think out the box when you've got only 340 customers to pay for the project this size. Thank you.
Thanks for thinking out of the box.
Any online questions? Colin, do you have a question?
Repeat that again. You speaking to me?
I wasn't sure if you had a question.
Yes, I do. I have a couple of questions. In the past 30 years, how many new customers have we gotten in the water district? There's been around about 320 for the past 30 years. So we are embarking on a massive project. And the second question is, how many times the existing system has broken down that it had to be? The third question is, you spoke of mobile generator. Is that generator that's parked on Kirk Road? Because if I remember correctly, Jane Luxinger had gotten some grants to put in generators for all the wells. Whatever happened to those generators, backup generators? And that mobile generator on Kirk Road hasn't moved there as far as I remember. And I pass there 4 times a day. So I don't know what generator he's talking about, Second World War generators that are going to help him pump the water. And the last question is Delaware Engineering. This question is directed at you, sir. You were hired, my understanding is, to do a project for the town of Liberty. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was your services terminated? And if they were, for what reason, sir?
I don't know that I actually want Joe to answer that question, Colin, because it's not relevant to what our public hearing is, which is comments on this system.
I mean, with due respect, Mr. Supervisor, we are spending $7.5 million for the water district, and the consumers of the water district are the ones who are going to pay. And yet nobody from the water district sits on any of these boards or able to review hard copies of what you guys are coming up with.
But I'm not on the board.
I'm not sure how to answer that, Colin, to tell you the truth, because we've got,
The answer is that's the legal structure that the state law established.
yeah,
You have a water district. The water district is operated by the town board. The town board is elected by the populace of the town. That's the legal structure. That's the answer to it.
The legal structure. What member of the town board has ever visited any of the wells in question?
well, I'll start with Al, Jane, and myself, Colin. We've all visited those wells and we've seen. So, you know, we're here to take comments
I'm here
apart.
with due respect, I'm one of those guys who are going to pay an increased water bill, and I have a couple of water bills, and that's why the questions.
Sure.
If you're going to use that to do the fire hydrants, yeah, and he's going to put in a 250,000 gallon tank and replace a 200,000 gallon tank, one of the pumps on the fire truck will empty that tank in no time. And that means the town will be left without without any water.
So is your suggestion that we should go for a bigger tank than the 250,000 gallon tank?
I think the fire hydrants, correct me if I'm wrong. I see a member of the fire department there. Correct me if I'm wrong. The fire hydrants are strictly to knock down the initial fire, and we have to search for other sources of water, because using that tank will empty the town tank in no time. Isn't that correct, Mr. Burkle?
Yeah, I mean, we use the fire hydrants, if they're in, fires in the district, we use the fire hydrants, and then the pumps, I would assume that the 3 pumps will recirculate the water to fill up the tank at the same time.
So this,
That's That's
getting,
not sufficient enough water, we'll use the dry hydrant, by a little Lake Erie.
so basically,
Is your suggestion, Colin, that we should be looking at a larger water tank for the purpose of fire suppression?
that's not within my purview. We have an engineer, maybe he should look at that. And the situation of the future tank, where is that going to be located? We haven't seen any topographical map of the area that's going to be supplying this water, if they're going to choose a new place to put that water tank.
No, it's at the same location that we've got.
I can answer
Yeah.
that for you, Colin. The proposed water storage tank would be located on the same property as the existing water storage tank.
Oh,
It would
okay.
be It would be actually at a location where the previous water storage tank was before the current one was built. The area has actually already essentially been prepared for a water storage tank because there was one there. We would probably have to demolish a little bit of old concrete foundation in order to put in new concrete foundation. But aside from that, there should not be significant grading or tree cutting required. There are some saplings that I believe have grown up over the 70-year period. So some brushing, some tree removal, but that is essentially a flat space directly next to the existing water storage tank that we are proposing to use for that. It would be at the same elevation. We would perhaps look at trying to make the water storage tank a little bit taller than the existing one to help with pressure a little bit. We don't want to overdo it with that either, since there is such a variance in elevation throughout the district. We don't want to improve pressures in one location just to make them too high in other locations. So essentially, we would want that to stay relatively similar.
And Joe, would you mind addressing the generator question issue? I'm not sure if I misspoke, but I believe generators are still part of the project, correct?
Generators are part of the project for at least 2 of the 3 well houses. There, as Dave said, there is a mobile one that's currently in use. During an emergency, you would have to either rely on one well, or you would have to use one well and then move the generator to a different well. I'm not certain where it's located.
It's located on the 2 out of the 2 wells that are being used now. It's located on the down below on the flat.
So I think that's number 1, I believe. That's kind of what I thought.
And that is a World War II generator, because I actually happened to be there and saw it, so.
I mean, that doesn't make it any less of a generator. It's still able to do.
No,
its
no,
job.
it works. It
And,
says a generator.
correct me
That's
if
the
I-
one he was talking about.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jane, didn't you acquire monies for generators?
Yes, but that was for town hall.
No, you were explicit about the wells having their own backup generators. And
I think I was explicit that they needed them, but the money we received money from actually Sullivan Renaissance. It was a prize that Sullivan, that our beautification group won. And
So-
we put it towards generators.
generators.
Well, at
you
the
say-
time, I thought, at the time, I did think it was generators, but it turned out to be a lot more costly than we knew. So, than we expected. I think
Is
that's
this-
how we called you. Actually, you know, Colin, I think that might be the first introduction we had to Delaware Engineering, was to get our code enforcement officer required that we had an engineer report or survey about what type of generators we needed. You did that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, the
No,
money, it wasn't a significant amount of money for the job that had to be done. So we couldn't spread it all around.
So you couldn't spread it all around. I hope it doesn't extrapolate to this financing of grants that we are envisioning for this $7.5 million project, which is may not come to pass. It's a hypothetical situation. Is that correct? There's a big F and a might.
I'm a little confused. Could you repeat that question, please?
You know, these grants that are going to offset the cost of this project, are these hypothetical situations or just pie in the sky that we are relying on and wind up not getting anything? Yeah. As in the case of the didn't get enough money to buy generators, it was only sufficient to buy one, if I'm correct.
I didn't even buy one.
We didn't even buy.
To answer your question honestly, there is no guarantee that a grant would be obtained. We certainly
okay.
hope that one will. But if one is not obtained, the town is not under any obligation to pay for this project themselves.
Until such time as this town board awards a contract to a successful bidder to actually construct this project, the town is not obligated to spend a dime on constructing this project.
Can I have that written in stone?
Oh, yeah, no,
That's the law.
that's the case. What we're trying to do right now is we're trying to apply for potential funds and grants. This
Potential,
meeting is,
potential.
go ahead.
I want to make it very clear for the betterment of the town, but at the same time, I want to live within my means. You know, for right now, I pay over $400 every quarter for my water bill, and I don't know who presented that original estimate of $200. I don't know where that $200 came, and I don't like being equated to other parts of the state. You know, we are a town in ourselves, and I think it behooves us to spend rationally and within our budget, within our means. Don't you think
And
so?
I think, Colin, that's exactly what the attorney for the town mentioned. If we are not able to secure any assisted funding, then
Yeah.
the town board has to look at how much money can we spend and how much of a project can we do.
Oh.
Helen was very clear in the beginning of this that
Yeah.
$7.5 million is a cap. That is, when we looked at it, what can we do? What needs to be done? What's important? This is what we came up with. Now what we need to do is see how much funding we're going to have and how much the board is going to be able to put forward, all or none.
I mean, there's definitely an improvement, but you know, like I said, I like to live within my means.
Well, and we would like to not
As
put
you
you
are,
over here.
as you're aware, it's not all the citizens of the town. It's only those that live within the water district that'll be
That's
response?
correct. You are considered a special district and town
Yes.
funding cannot be used within a special district, only those that are served by it. That is,
That-
the board is very clear on that.
Cognizant of that fact too. And that's why I ask these questions. It's not that I impede progress, but progress with due diligence.
If I may respond to a couple of points. It is true that the town is a town itself and is not the same as the rest of the state. The reason Helen brings up state averages is because we are trying to get money from the state, and the state looks at where they put their monies based on averages. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. And to be seriously considered for state money, there are certain percentages that the state kind of requires that a municipality meet when it comes to water charges versus MHI.
Yeah.
This $7.5 million number was designed to allow the town to have, we believe, the best chance of being considered by the state. Now that $7.5 million number is not, it is not required that the state will, or that the town will spend that much money. It is easier to remove parts of the project once funding has been allotted than it is to add more to the project. What we typically do is we include as much as possible in these funding applications. And if the results are favorable to the town, we do as much as we can. If they're less favorable, then it's much more easy to remove portions of the project than it is to add more later on. So what we're trying to do is get the best potential possible funding for the town. We're trying to apply for that now. If we are not successful, the town does not have to proceed with all or any portion of it.
One final question, Mr. Supervisor. Is there any possibility we can have a copy or view, a hard copy of this project?
The map plan and report, I believe, is already online on the town's website.
Yeah, Colin, it should be online, but we do have hard copies, and they've been available for several months, I believe. Right, for review. Yeah, not to remove from the, unfortunately, not to remove from the town hall,
Yeah.
because it is
Yeah.
rather thick. So
Okay,
yes,
great.
we do, yeah, it is available for review. And Crystal's checking to see if it's on the website. I thought it was.
Pretty sure it is.
Thanks and good.
Thank you, Colin.
You got a question for Joe, and maybe for Dave. Besides the 95-year-old distribution system, what requirements are mandated by the health department?
By the health department specifically in regard to the distribution system, I don't know that there are any. There are recommendations. For example, it is recommended that water mains be at least 4 inches in diameter. There are water mains throughout the system that are 2 inch, 1 inch, or even 3/4 inch in diameter. So part of this project would be to increase the size of some of those small water mains. There's also a situation with older cast iron pipe that sometimes happens, which is called tuberculation, where essentially a specific type of rust builds up on the inside of the pipe. So
4-inch lines now, I have it.
4-inch line can easily become a 1-inch line. It's kind of crazy to see it. So that's another thing that we believe some of the older portions of the district would have cast iron just because of the time frame in which they were constructed. So the proposal would be to use ductile iron, which is much less susceptible to tuberculation. Another health department requirement, and I believe the diameter issue has to do with fire protection to some degree. Difficult to get fire flows out of a 3/4 water main. I'm getting confirmation on that. They all, smaller mains also result in lower pressure in the area. You have a number of problems. We also talked about dead end mains. That's where the water main goes down the street, doesn't connect anything else to the end. That water has a tendency to sit in the main. You can end up with discolored water, poor tasting water. It doesn't. When the water flows, it tends to be healthier and the water pressure is better. So what we're proposing is there's a couple of cases where a water main is very close to another water main but doesn't connect. A couple more feet and you would remove that dead end. In cases where we can't do that, we're talking about maybe installing a relatively inexpensive fitting which would automatically flush that line at intervals that would be, controlled by the town water department to allow the water to flow, not just sit in the main. Those are some of the health issues that we're going to address in this project. I don't know if that exactly answers the question.
So just curious as to what the health department had to do with this. Besides the CH1.
They would need, the health department specifically would need to review every part of the design of the project. They do oversee any improvement projects to a water system. So they would need to not oversee, but they would need to review and approve the plans before anything is constructed.
Yes, Mr. Conlon, you mentioned earlier the average income, the state, puts a lot of emphasis on the average income for the grant proposal or monies to come in. I believe it was mentioned Narrowsburg, $40,000 a year is the average income.
More than that now.
I believe it's in the 40s.
Yes, in the 40s.
I don't have the number off.
So where is that information obtained from? And would it behoove us to take a survey of the actual 340 customers that will bear the debt rather than, a larger picture to perhaps come in with a better number?
That is a possibility. And I believe that's actually something that was discussed with Candace Balmer of RCAP Solutions. One service that they do provide to municipalities is they will do income surveys if requested. I know that she specifically did an income survey for the town of Hartwick, New York. They have a hamlet with a water district, kind of similar to here. Unfortunately, in that case, when they did the income survey, the results were that essentially the wealthiest people in the town lived within the hamlet, and it did not improve the MHI, for funding eligibility. That might not be the case here, but it also might.
We even considered doing just districts within the water district at one point, looking at certain areas with Candace, but then I think she said that was.
And that was also making the assumption that people would willingly give up their incomes.
That is something that the town of Hartwick had issues with. A certain percentage of response is required, and it took quite a long time for that number of people to respond. But it is a possibility.
I just thought with the smaller pools, 340.
Yeah, well, these numbers come from the census, actually. And the hamlet, which is essentially the water district, is a separate census district. And then there's the town of Tustin. So there is a separate district for them. Census takes nevertheless.
I'll just make it public to comment and just move it offhand here. If you went and did the hamlet, at the town average is 40,000, it's going to be higher. considerably
Yeah.
high.
Well, but
You're gonna blast yourself right out of it.
I think the number that's being bandied about is probably the Hamlet number anyway, and it's much more than four. It's like,
That's not an honest,
yeah.
that is not an honest.
Well, of course, you go back. I think this is based on 2010 or something like that. I don't know, or whatever census.
Jane, I can address that. It's actually, it's based on census data, but it's based on the 2018 community
18.
survey. Yeah, so the census is done every 10 years and that's everybody they count. But then every year they do a sampling of the population so that they can estimate changes in between census. If that helps. So it's technically it's estimated, but it's based on 2018.
Okay. Thank you, Helen.
Any comment outside?
I think we've fulfilled an obligation to the people.
I have a couple of questions.
Certainly.
Joe, the outline shows that you're gonna replace 38,900 feet of pipe. Okay,
Yeah.
That's basically the whole system.
Essentially, yes.
And plus you're gonna add about $6,800 feet of new, line. You're also gonna replace water mains of 4-inch diameter or smaller.
More or less, yep.
So what would you replace them with?
We would say we would replace those with 6-inch diameter ductile iron pipe as opposed to whatever material they currently are, which might be cast iron, it might be ductile, it might be, I think there's probably some copper from other materials. So we would like to see 6-inch minimum for water mains if possible. And like I mentioned before, much of the additional mains would be small sections to connect dead ends to other existing lines. There are also a couple of significantly larger sections, one that I believe would connect from 97, one portion of the water mains on 97 to the other, which is currently an unserved area. That is, I believe, lower on the list because it would be relatively expensive. It would allow a few new in-district properties to be served, and it would eliminate dead ends, but that would be a relatively expensive.
So that would be something that we could make a decision on going forward.
All of these are something that could be decided upon. We have tried to prioritize this from what we believe is most pressing to what we think is least pressing. But what we're trying to do is wrap everything that could potentially be done that would benefit the water district. So that when we apply, we can get a determination on the maximum potential project. And like I said, it's easier to remove parts from the project than to add them later on. So if we were to get a grant of X, and we said, well, but now we also want to do this, let's make it X plus Y. That's pretty difficult to do. If we want to say, all right, we got X, but we can't really do these couple of things, usually the funding agencies are much more amenable to removing portions of the project and adding. And that's not to say they won't allow you to add, but there's a lot more review. It slows things down. Sometimes they require entirely new reports. Sometimes they require amendments to reports.
It might also require redoing things that you're doing tonight. For
Yeah,
example,
seeker,
seeker, right?
this
Need
meeting might have to be
addressed.
done and things like that.
You might need to do another 202B proceeding with the hearing and additional findings. So that's the reason why generally, as Joe's saying, you establish at the onset the maximum extent of the scope of what you might do, and then you adjust accordingly based upon what you find because once they design it, then you'll get a sense of, and then once you bid it, then you'll get the real sense of what the cost is, because all the engineer can ever do is give you a best guess estimate of what they think the cost might be based on what they see on prior work that they've done. But the economy can entirely skew what somebody might bid. in either direction, by the way, you know, depending on what's going on and what kind of work is out there and what kind of work is available, you can get a great price or you can get a crazy high price too. Materials drive the cost as well, and it's a tough time right now.
For example, right now, materials are, everyone says that materials are very expensive right now, and that is true. But we've also had several, personally, my company's had several bids that have gone within the last 4 or 5 months, where the prices came in surprisingly low. People are looking for work right now, so sometimes you never really know until you bid, like Ken said. But we have several steps before we get to bidding, and at any point, we can decide to either do or not do any part of it.
Another small question is, you're proposing to construct a new booster pump station at the well on 97. Now, how much of a increase in PSI would you get by putting that in?
Well, that would be based on the size of the well. You can essentially dial it into almost whatever you want. So we would design it to, well, before we designed it, we would have to do specific testing in the area to determine exactly what we think the pressure is. I know Dave has done pressure readings out there, and some of them have come back surprisingly low.
Right.
So we would design that pump specifically to increase that to a range that.
So would that affect the, let's say, I know where he was talking towards the end of the line there, but what about the people on the other end of the line? Is that gonna increase their PSI?
That would probably not have significant impact on other portions of the district. The way it would be set up, it probably would mostly be that area. We are looking at some other things that we might try to do to get other portions of the district kind of more in line with what we would like. Dead end lines, increasing the size of pipes, those sort of things, we believe should help in some of those other areas that have some trouble.
And Joe, there was some issues on that specific end of the line that you're talking about and what Al is referring to of booster pumps in residences.
Yes.
And that was one of the reasons why this particular part of the project came up.
Yeah, so there are people we believe that have residential, booster pumps within their houses, so that they can have water circulating throughout their house at a reasonable pressure. We would be looking to have them remove those and replace that with a town controlled pump station. That would provide them with adequate pressure at the curb as opposed to them having to boost their pressure inside their house. That was the object of that.
Okay.
Particular item.
And there was another question I had. Oh, in your experience, how many, like we have 3 people plus a superintendent. Is that typical for a water department this size?
Water department this size, I'm not certain. I know that is not an unusual number of people to have for a water system. I also know that I believe Ben has pointed out that some of the guys that are working under Dave are working to become licensed. And once they were, you might be able to reduce the number of people you had slightly. Another thing to consider is without the level sensing and communications stuff, you've got guys that have to drive from one end of the district to the other just to see what the pressure is at well house 3. And if it's a specific level, then somebody has to then drive to the water tank to see what's going on there, shut off well house 1, shut off, turn on this well, turn off that well. So without automation, those guys do have to kind of go all over the place. You're still going to have people going around looking for leaks and stuff like that. That's another thing. The more leaks there are, The busier those guys are gonna be.
And one of the other things that was mentioned was the increased electricity that's gonna be used. Is there a possibility of getting some kind of a solar system tied into those the generators and so forth?
There is that possibility, I assume. I am not an expert on solar technology. I could tell you that there is some space near Wellhouse 3 that could be looked at for something like that. That is not currently proposed in the report.
Can I ask a question? Wouldn't it come off, wouldn't that electricity come off the municipal electricity that,
That is what we are anticipating now.
because when we had the solar array built, it was built at 100 and, I don't know, if Brandy's on, 110% of our use, so there is.
Yeah, but that's a buyback situation, isn't it? What I'm
Oh, I
talking
don't
about
know.
is a direct,
Oh.
direct
Oh, okay,
system.
something
Yeah,
different.
they gotta pump water,
Excuse me?
they'll pump water.
Yeah, but I assume that the solar is gonna, collect it and hold it and then use it when it's needed.
Or let you have batteries by the well.
I would have to say I don't specifically see a reason that could not be a possibility. I don't specifically know much about solar power myself.
Just a question. Thank you.
Hey, Joe, can I ask you a question, Joe? Joe? Ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
You said that installation of the booster pumps at the far-flung areas of the system does not increase the PSI in the end user. So what purpose does this booster pump really serve?
No. I'm sorry. That was not what I meant. The booster pump would increase the water pressure to the end user, but what it would do is it would increase the water in the system itself and then to the end user. What we have currently is a situation where some end users have their own private booster pump stations within their house. And that is typically frowned upon by the health department, I believe. And so what we would do is we would try to replace the need for them to have their own personal private booster pumps within their house by providing the pressure in the system and not in their houses. The other thing I said was that I did not think this booster pump, the way we would design it, would not unduly increase the pressure in other parts of the district where the water pressure is already high enough. We would not make that water pressure too high by installing this booster pump. It would simply help areas where it was too low. And I believe that's what I was trying to say. If I misspoke, I apologize.
Now, you just said there are people with private booster pumps at their places.
That is what we believe, yes.
I think I have to correct you on that. All the people on Main Street, all the stores on Main Street, on the riverside have booster pumps maintained and serviced by the members of the water district. We pay for the water district personnel to go in and fix their booster pumps, change their booster pumps, use our equipment to dig the trenches to fix their leak. So how is that we have to support their booster pumps? And you said they were private.
Excuse me,
Hold on
this is
one second,
David.
Colin. Yeah,
Well,
Dave,
what-
could you please answer that?
Yeah, Colin, the pumps that you're talking about on Main Street are for the sewer, not for their water.
The booster pumps on Main Street is for the,
They're not booster pumps, they're sewer pumps. They're for their sewer stations that go down in the bottom of the basement and they're pumped up from their basement up onto Main Street, then down Fifth Street
so it's only the sewer that has the booster pumps there.
on Main Street, correct?
Anybody else has booster pumps for their water supply?
We
Because-
believe that there are some in a further part of the district, yes.
Not anybody as far as Francis, he's at the end of the line. And
Cranks.
he uses the water pressure that comes from the
Right.
tank. But
Over
by
on 97, Colin, towards Cackletown and 52. That's
Okay.
where we're having a water pressure issue.
Cackletown.
Cackletown Road by well 3.
Yeah, but we don't go all the way down
Yeah, we
Cackletown.
do.
Was the water district extended all the way down to Cackletown?
Yes, sir.
They wanted
To
it
Route
at
52.
Route 52.
On the corners.
All right, that's something, all right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Yep.
Any questions from the board? I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, I'll be my motion. I have a second from Bruce. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sure to thank Joe for all the hard work. And
Not done yet.
he's not done yet.
Oh, but only for water.
Number 4 on the agenda.
This is the, next would be the next procedural step in, which is with, under 202B of the town law, which is what results in the ultimate findings and final order, and these were prepared by bond counsel. And they've consolidated the two actions, which is fine, into a single resolution and order. And basically what it does is it recites in the whereas paragraphs what the town board is contemplating doing, which is making certain improvements to the water system serving the district with a new 250,000 gallon steel water tank, storage tank, installation of a new booster pump station, well improvements, replacement of existing fire hydrants, water valves and water mains, and installation of new automatic flushing stations, and additional fire hydrants, water valves, and water mains. It recites the fact that the town board adopted a resolution in order calling for the public hearing that you just held in a manner provided pursuant to section 193 of the town law, and describing in general terms those proposed improvements and specifying the estimated maximum estimated cost to be $7.5 million, and stating that the town board would meet to hear the persons interested in that subject matter tonight at 6:30 via Zoom and in the town hall. It recites that public hearing was held as scheduled, and all persons interested were given an opportunity to be heard. And then it follows up with the term action, which is based upon the evidence given at the public hearing and otherwise described herein, which is the map planner report and all the prior proceedings. 1, the notice of the public hearing described in the preambles hereof was posted and published as required by law and is in all respects satisfactory. 2, the construction of the improvements here above described is in the public interest. 3, preparatory to solicitation of competitive bids relevant to such construction, definite plans and specifications, and a careful estimate of the expense of those improvements are directed to be prepared by a licensed and qualified engineer selected by the town. And the town attorney is hereby directed to assist in the preparation of a proposed contract for execution of the work and to submit the same to this town board for examination and approval. And 4th, that the town clerk shall record a copy of this order in the office of the county clerk in accordance with the requirements of section 195 of the town law. And 5th, that the order shall take effect immediately. So that would be the next step of action, would be for the board to adopt that resolution order containing those recitals and those findings, if it's the board's pleasure to do so.
Does the board have any questions regarding that resolution? If not, I would make the resolution for the findings in order for the increase in improvement facilities of the Narrowsburg Water District.
And I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 The next step is the bond resolution, which was also prepared obviously by bond counsel. It is very standard and typical of a bond resolution. It authorizes the issuance of serial bonds in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $7 $6,500,000 pursuant to the local finance law to finance those improvements that we've been talking about, and delegates the authority to issue bond anticipation notes in anticipation of the sale of bonds to the town supervisor. Again, it recites the specific purpose of it, which we've already described, which is those improvements, the 250,000 gallon new tank and all the replacement and new items of water valves, mains, hydrants that we've already discussed. Town board plans to finance the total cost of said purpose by the issuance of serial bonds in an amount not to exceed $7.5 million, in accordance with the local finance law, and the assessment, levy, and collection of special assessments upon the several lots and parcels of land within the district, which the town board shall deem especially benefited by those facilities, meaning the properties in the water district. And so much of to be in such just proportion to the amount of benefit. Funding for said purpose is being sought through the New York State Environmental Facility Corporation's Drinking Water State Revolving Fund and through New York State Environmental Facility Corporation's Water Grant Program under the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. Other sources of funding may also be available and may be pursued depending upon program requirements and project eligibility. So the point of that is you may not in the long run wind up, even if you do a $7.5 million project, you may not be borrowing $7.5 million. That's obviously going to get reduced by whatever other source of funding that you find, grant or otherwise. The next one determines that the purpose or object is described as a probably useful life of or useful purpose of 40 years. That's relevant to how long you can borrow the money for. Section 4 is determined that the proposed maturity of the obligation authorized by this resolution will be in excess of 5 years. You're certainly not going to do this in less than 5 years. It would cripple the taxpayer to do it over that short of a period of time. Current funds are not required to be provided prior to the issuance of the bonds authorized by this resolution. That's section 5. The proceeds of the bonds authorized by this resolution and any bond anticipation notes will be applied to reimburse the town for expenditures made after the effective date for the specific purpose herein. Basically, what that's saying is if the town lays out of general funds any expenses associated with this, the town gets reimbursed for it by the water district. Because again, the ultimate cost of this has to be borne by the people that are benefited by it, not by the town at large. Each of the bonds that authorized, this is section 7, each of the bonds authorized by this resolution, any bond anticipation notes will contain the recital of validity prescribed by section 52 of the local finance law. The faith and credit of the town will be pledged for the payment of the principal and interest. An annual appropriation will be made in each year sufficient to pay that principal and interest on those bonds as they become payable. There shall be annually levied on the several lots and parcels of land within the district a tax sufficient to pay the principal and interest of those bonds. Section 8 authorizes, subject to provisions of the local finance law, the power to authorize bond anticipation notes in anticipation of the issuance of the serial bonds. And basically what that's talking about is as this project goes along, you will short-term borrow the money with bond anticipation notes. And once the full amount is expended, it'll then get rolled into a final bond issue, which will be the long-term financing. That way you don't take the whole $7.5 million or whatever it is up front. You borrow it as you need it. You only pay interest on what you've got outstanding at that time. It gives you the flexibility to make this least impactful economically on the taxpayers in the district as possible. And the supervisor, as the chief fiscal officer, is the one who's authorized to execute these documents on behalf of the water district and the town. The supervisor is also authorized to execute a project finance agreement. That's the way financing works with the Environmental Facilities Corporation. You have a formal financing agreement that you enter into with them for that. And the supervisor is under section 10 is also authorized to take such actions and execute other documents as may be necessary for this to be a tax-free issuance. And that's important because what purchasers of the bonds, whether it's Environmental Facilities Corporation or anybody else, if it's tax-free, the interest rate is lower than if it's taxable. And section 11 is the validity of the bond can only be contested only if Such obligations are authorized for an object or purpose for which the town is not authorized to expend money. The provisions of law which should be complied with. Basically, what happens is within 20 days after this, we publish a notice, what's called an estoppel notice, and that starts a 20-day clock for anybody to challenge it. And otherwise, if the obligations are issued in violation of the New York State Constitution, none of which will happen. We won't do anything that's not provided by law or by the Constitution. Anybody who felt the need to challenge that would have a window of 20 days to do that if they saw fit to do that. And Section 12 is what authorizes the publication or the summary thereof, and I'm sure that bond counsel will provide, if they haven't already, that notice, and that's the estoppel notice that I was just talking about. So that's the resolution, and this resolution takes effect immediately upon its adoption, if it is so adopted. It needs to be adopted by a supermajority of the board, which means there needs to be 4 affirmative votes of the board in order to adopt.
Board have any questions? Oh, the attorney.
No, you did a very, very fine job.
Make a motion.
Not my first ride at that road.
Make a motion, authorizing the issuance of the serial bonds of Town of Hudson. And the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $7.5 million. Pursuant to the local finance law and finance certain improvements to the water system serving the Narrowsburg Water District and delegating the power to issue bond anticipation notes and anticipation of the sale of such bonds to the town supervisor.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bruce, aye. Al,
Aye.
Jane,
Aye.
and I'm an aye.
That's really, yeah.
Yeah. Good thing we have 4 people.
Another delay.
Four point three. I would like to have a discussion about our water rates, and I know that we had passed a resolution to implement those rates for the current billing cycle, which would begin July 1st. And I'm looking to the board to extend that time and not do it now until I would like to see it in the final quarter, which would be the October, November, and December billings.
Which bills the
Is this-
usage of.
It would be the usage for October, November, December. It would be billed on the 31st of December. That gives the people right now that are going to get their January bill or their, their July bill. It would give them the next quarter to make any adjustments that they wish to make as far as conservation efforts, but it would also give us time. We've got some issues that have come up. Two that I see that I'd like to, give the superintendent of water and sewer the time to take care of. One is our not-for-profits. And the other is also a not-for-profit that was brought up to me is the cemetery that's down like Glen Cove, because they are hooked up into the district. When we've taken our water rates and we are now paying our budget with our rates and not using the tax to supplement our rates to get our budget paid for the $35 a quarter, you're not-for-profits we're paying $35 a quarter because they weren't being taxed on their property tax. Whereas if I have a home in the district, I was paying my $35 for the water usage, but then I was being taxed for the rest of the money in order to make the district whole because our rates were not making our budget whole. So that's taken someplace like a cemetery, and they're going to now go to the minimum usage, which we said would be 127, because they don't get taxed.
Mhm.
But now we have tripled, they have become a burden. And I think that's something that we need to look at before we.
I think also, by the way it was being done, where we were taxing people on top of the fee that they were paying, those people, the commercial people, for example, were not being taxed at the same rate. So I think that's another consideration too.
So I think there's some things I'd like to see cleaned up. Dave, are you still with us?
Yes, Ben.
Okay, I know you've got some more stuff that you would like to go over as far as, some assessed properties or some people that have property that's in the district but not being charged, but you've found some stuff that you could utilize some extra time on?
Yep.
Go ahead, Jane. I know you're gonna
I
say it.
know, I don't like it because it's just delaying the inevitable and it's money that's not gonna come in that we would have otherwise had come in. But, so you're asking that we start billing when? October?
It will be the October, November, December,
Which bill comes out? I thought we,
December 31st.
right, so that's a solid year that we didn't have anything coming. All right, I mean, everybody, you have to live with it. I just,
Because the district is made whole, although we've got some expenses this year, much like the leak on 97, our district has been made whole through taxes
I understand that. I understand that.
and I'm just trying to lessen the burden.
At this point, it's not gonna make a big difference.
It's not,
because
but
it's
I would
just
like
a
to also
quarter.
give Dave the opportunity to clean up some of the housekeeping that we've found since we've implemented this since the last board meeting.
But we're not gonna change the rates. We're
No, the
leaving-
rates are staying the same.
Okay,
We've
so you're
passed out.
really essentially saying we're going to fix what should have been fixed.
I'm looking to buy Dave some time to get his paperwork in order because it's not where it should be. And I'm using it as we're trying to help the taxpayers get ready for this big hit.
Okay,
So yes, I'm using it this time. We need more time to implement it.
all right,
I'm just- I'm just trying to make Mike think that we're doing something good for him.
well,
I make that motion that we delay it. I gotta agree with that. Give a little time for the people to prepare for this, and I think it's a good idea. I make that motion.
we've been talking about it for months. But all right, go ahead.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
No.
Okay. 3-1.
Oh, come on.
I'm allowed to say
You are
no.
allowed.
4.4, I'm speaking with the court clerk. There's an ability for the court to apply for a JCAP grant, Justice Court. I believe it's an assistance program in which they fund things. And she was looking to try to apply for one of the grants in order to use, if we want, with the new building on Main Street.
To do what?
Either an addition or,
Renovation or something.
That's great, except you have to know what you're doing before you. apply for
well,
the
it would
grant.
require us getting an engineering firm involved in drawing plans.
But
Ken, are
have
you
to know-
familiar with these at all, the
I
JCAPs?
know, I'm familiar with them to know that they exist, but and they do them annually, and it's through the court system, and
We do it every year.
finance.
Isn't this
basically
one?
capital things.
Yeah, usually she's in the $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 area.
Yeah, usually they buy computers and hardware. and
Yeah,
things like that.
yeah. Well, I'm never against it, of course, but you have to know what you're doing before you apply for grants, so you can't just say yes.
Okay. So
What
that-
you might want to do is get a planning grant.
I was
through them.
thinking that might be something that when you speak with Jocelyn, you would be able to guide her into.
And what
Is this because I said no?
how much of a grant is she looking?
She was looking for 30,000, but again, I think maybe
Yeah.
we can get Jane to sit down with her, or even I'll sit down with Jane and her and
Yeah,
look it over. and
okay,
come up with something.
I'm happy to do that. So we don't need a resolution, that's just,
Well, 30,000 is not gonna go
It's not going very far. no.
No, yeah,
But we'll figure it out.
you have to know what you're, okay.
Does the board have any other business that's not on the agenda? If not, I am going to open the floor to public comments. Did I miss something? Okay.
Oh, the hands.
When these bonds are finally issued, do you anticipate selling them to the public? Or do they get placed with investment banks? Who actually will buy them?
Well, in this particular instance, the likelihood is that they will be purchased by the Environmental Facilities Corporation, which is an arm of the New York State, which is, they've got a revolving loan fund because it's the cheapest way to finance this thing. We'll get it, as I think was described in the presentation. The district isn't eligible for 0% financing, but they've got 3 levels of financing with EFC. 0% hardship financing, subsidized financing, and market rate financing. If we're going to do market rate financing, we can see what their rates are, and you could go compare to what a bank or other investor might pay for that bond at that point. But given that it's subsidized rate that's available, the likelihood is that's where it's going to be placed, is with Environmental Facilities Corporation.
Kind of closed
It's
loop,
better.
Doesn't actually get the public involved.
No. Well, the public, other than it's a public or semi-public entity that
Right.
we're borrowing, it's New York State revolving fund for the financing, so.
Was that an invitation? You were thinking of funding?
Mike
the
was
water
interested in
district?
buying $7.5 million.
Find it here, we certainly want to step up. Buy a water bond.
You want to invest about $7.5 million in a tax-free bond, right?
I just have more of a question than a comment. I'm trying to understand the billing versus the operation and the cost of producing the water. So what you were collecting from the users was not meeting the operation cost. So now you were paying the rest of the operation cost through the tax money that you collect out of all of the town of Tustin?
No,
Or just the people?
Just in the water district.
Oh,
If you live within the water district and you looked at your bill,
so you paid your town taxes?
Yep.
Okay.
you would have a thing that would say
No, I
water.
thought you were using some of the property taxes to pay for the
And
water.
that's, it's a good point to make, because that's one of the most misinformed
Right.
thing that people find out is you're using my
It
town.
wouldn't upset me that much because I'm willing to contribute to.
But there are, believe it or not, there, and I think Joe can probably know about it, is a lot of small municipalities like we have here, the town becomes obligated to pay for these districts that cannot support themselves. So it's not in the best interest
Right,
of a
right.
town board to allow the districts to become dysfunctional or to the point where they can't fend for
I
themselves.
mean, people out of the district are already paying, whatever this 7,000 to 10,000 for the well and the electric to produce their own water, and then if it was coming out of their property taxes, I just wanted to help balance everything. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Online questions? If not, I would make a motion to enter an executive session for the purpose of possible land acquisition.
Oh, yeah, I'll second that.
All in favor? Folks, thank you for coming out. I appreciate the questions. It
Yeah.
was-
And Joe has a long trip home.
down.
Thanks, Joe, for making it journey.
Oh, my.
Thank you.
Pete, July 3rd.
Oh, you coming? Yeah. Okay, these are all right. Stop by, slide by my house, 3 o'clock. By for some food, cocktails. That's a program. I think you all know where I live, right?
Thank you.
Everybody knows where I live. I think, find out from Jane. I'm just up from the town garage. 3 o'clock until whatever. So I'm gonna stop by at 5, 'cause I know Claudine's, something with the